I would rather take the risk to try and make it happen than just to do nothing. I don't need to be here if I'm just going to tick boxes. My job is to try and drive this forward. Hi, I'm Ryan Stewart from Canon-Europe. I'm the Demand Marketing Senior Manager here, responsible for EU14 as we call it, and my responsibilities are for campaign strategy, comms, marketing automation, privacy, and some project management responsibilities. So we have two parts of the business. We have an office printing business and a professional printing business. Separate audiences, but both, due to COVID, had their own challenges. So on the office side, the whole of Europe essentially working from home for an extended period of time meant that print volumes in the office were significantly reduced, which is a big driver for a big part of our revenue. And on the production side, we also saw a significant reduction in print volume. And then Drupa, which is a huge print show on the production print side of the business, was cancelled due to COVID. And we were seeing all these challenges that were really driving a reduction in revenue. We needed to figure out, essentially on the fly, what we were going to do about this to drive our engagement, net new, customer acquisition, and how to retain as much of the existing business as we could, both in terms of the volumes and the customers that we had. Bring together some of the tactics that we were doing in a more aligned way with a vision behind it. So we had, over the prior 6 years, really developed quite a strong marketing automation approach, but it heavily relied on outbound comms. Over that time period, outbound comms generally in the B2B space, I suppose consumer as well, but certainly the B2B space, have become more and more overused and therefore less effective. So we weren't getting the same engagement. We had therefore played around with social, search and display advertising. It was very difficult, challenging circumstances around it. And it was very difficult from a central perspective to try and get visibility of what everyone was doing, how effective it was, what was good, what was best practice, what wasn't working, and get control of the costs and the results. So that was kind of the driver behind it, to try and figure out how we do that and how we become as effective as possible using these tactics and budget across Europe rather than pockets of budget. Prior to this, budget was shared with our countries, so those EU14 countries. We had a central budget, but media budget sat squarely in each of those countries individually, and ownership of these type of tactics very much sat in the country. So that it was a bold step actually to kind of say, right, we are going to take that budget centrally and take ownership of the activity and try and drive it forward to get the results. Also, it was risky because we didn't have the expertise necessarily within the business. So trying to take ownership of this and say, right guys, this is what we should be doing. We're getting left behind here in some aspects. We're very mature and very strong in certain aspects of our marketing team and tactics. We're getting left behind in other areas. And somebody had to take ownership of that and try and drive this change. So there was a number of big steps that needed to be taken and a number of risk factors that sat behind them as well. One, get buy-in to get support from the right people. Two, get budget. So we needed the buy-in to get the relevant budget that we needed. And three, limit our exposure internally. So this was never going to work if it was some big democratic view on what we should be doing. If there's 14 countries involved, a huge central team, the leadership team. If we had every opinion sitting behind that, we never would have got anywhere. So we looked at which of the countries within Europe had the right markets, perhaps the primed markets for these types of activities, the right resource internally and the appetite to support it. We found these 5 countries that we believed would be the right ones to trial this activity with. Then we found a partner in an agency that we could work with that helped us to kind of set out the steps to get this moving, helped us develop a forecast so that we could kind of see what return we should expect. And then we took that back, got that signed off, and then really started to drive the activity by demonstrating what would happen if we didn't take action. So we could see market decline plus changes in the effectiveness of what we were doing. So it would have resulted essentially in less net new business coming through the marketing team, loss of existing customers. So we had to highlight that fact first, and then using the audit, we could then start to showcase if we implemented some of these changes, what does that look like? What's the forecast if we get this right? And then with some honesty around it about some trial and error and the journey we need to go through, we started to bring people around. It also helps when you have a team around you, both from the agency partners as well as your internal team, that focus on the revenue and the end result, which is what your leadership team are always looking for, rather than the softer marketing measures. So we really kind of focused around that and the impact of not taking action versus taking action on the bottom line and the revenue. Millions in pipeline, which was really strong and exceeded the forecast expectations. We had 5 times return on the advertising spend. We beat our CAC payback expectations. And most importantly, what I was able to demonstrate to the business was ongoing improvements against those metrics. So as I said, it was a journey. We knew that there were going to be challenges and things to learn. So we smashed all of the expectations, but we were able to do it at the same time as showing continuous improvement. So we could therefore forecast and we can keep going in that direction at a time. So having been through the pilot phase, we then managed to secure additional budget for our budgeting process and our leadership team centrally. And then we begin to roll this out across our other markets, getting buy-in from marketing directors there, leveraging the data that we secured through the pilot and the first phase of the additional rollout. Today, we're scaling spend by 2 times and we're launching into all 15 markets in Europe. The transformation's fairly significant, both in terms of actual maybe tasks that are delivered, but also in the mindset. So very much shifted from output to driven. So there's a lot of taking briefs from other parties within the business. So we were very much output driven. People were very busy to outcome driven. So really looking at the revenue, which is partly down to the strategies that the guys are building and deploying, but also the fact that with these tactics, the feedback is much quicker. So you kind of see the impact on the pipeline much quicker. Therefore, your focus is on, okay, how do we optimize that? How do we take the learnings from that to implement into the next thing? So a big shift in kind of day-to-day tasks, but also feeling of responsibility around that revenue. You can see the direct impact, and that kind of drives the action across the business. Where the media budget sits and how it's accessed. So that is now, it sits centrally with us. And it is also more of a non-negotiable when we're planning the other activities for the year. So for the first time last year, we put the media budget in the central budget. We split it by different parts of the business, which is fine. But then when we then came to review and had to reduce, because we always kind of budget more than we can deliver, we really do want to touch the media budget and the supporting budgets that go alongside it. And this is a bit of a shift because in previous years it was seen as a bit of an easy target. It's quite big numbers and it's quite easy to remove in place of other things. And this year there was a different mindset towards it that we could really secure and safeguard it when we were looking at how we were going to deliver the plan for this year. But we've had some significant opportunities come through from that paid search activity. That's probably the biggest surprise, and that's a positive one, and that it works in a production print environment that is really high end. So you think that typically that is very much a relationship driven environment, but actually we've had these huge opportunities come through from some of these tactics, which is quite surprising and actually enabled us to shift our strategy and focus to try and drive more of that. We still have task-based activities that we have to deliver, so we have products that are launching and we have to focus on those things and plan for them and resource for them. But then we have these other demand-driven activities which we're much more in control of. So when we're doing the planning for the year, we're much more in control of what those activities might look like and what those results could be. We kind of drive that strategy and get sign-off from other parts of the business rather than the other way around, which historically it would have been. So quite a big shift. So we still have our traditional responsibilities, but we also now have more control and more ownership, perhaps, of those performance-related tasks and activities. We actually initially only partnered with Ziggy to do the audit. So our foundation, we didn't really know where to start with this. So we were trying to find somebody that could kind of help dig into the detail, come back and tell us, okay, this is your starting point, this is your opportunity, to see if there was an opportunity for one, and then we were going to figure out what to do. And actually the guys were so good, so revenue focused and driven, and so easy to work with that it became a bit of a no-brainer that these two might be able to partner with. And they're incredibly supportive, not just in the delivery of the work, but in understanding the journey that we're on within Canon, and kind of having to sometimes be quite patient with us while we figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to make this work, what the processes look like, who the people responsible for certain tasks are when we haven't done it before.